Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. Your host, a behavioral scientist and bachelor, talks to leading experts and successful singles about living solo and living well. Travel more, make things, sleep in when you want to. Here's the playbook for the person who is unapologetically unattached. Now, please welcome Dr. Peter McGraw.
Welcome back. One of the benefits of being solo is optionality. You can do more with your life than the standard Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, or these days, 8 to 6. Today's episode explores an intriguing idea. Give up your residence and head out on the road to live and work. The rise of the digital nomad lifestyle has been fueled by the rise of remote work, Airbnb, and other technological advances. I'm joined by an enthusiastic digital nomad, Jesse Thomas, and a return guest, Lisa Slavid, who is new to the digital nomad game. They give you an initial glimpse into this exciting yet challenging lifestyle. We talk tips, tricks, and pitfalls, but the thing that I like most about the episode is the use of a theme to help you make decisions about where to go and what to do, chasing food, weather, or other available singles. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Let's get started. Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is Jesse Thomas. Jesse is the CEO and founder of Jess3, a creative interactive agency specializing in data visualization. Described as, quote, one of the web's hottest designers, unquote, by Mashable, his firm has worked with organizations such as Nike, NASA, Facebook, Google, Samsung, and the World Bank. He joins us from Puerto Rico by way of Antigua, by way of Alaska, to discuss his life as a digital nomad. Welcome, Jesse.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Hey, Peter. Hey, Lisa.
We are joined by a previous guest and now guest co-host, Lisa Slavid. Lisa is an expert in strategic planning, positive psychology, strength building, motivation, and innovation. She has over 25 years of experience designing learning workshops, programs, and keynote speeches. She works with organizations from corporations, universities, and nonprofits. She's an organizational consultant and executive coach, a semester at Sea trustee, and the creator of the published P Doodles cartoon series, which you must check out on Instagram. Lisa appeared in episode 17, which feels like a long time ago, titled Lisa's Second Mountain, where we discuss her plans to be a digital nomad. She was living in Santa Barbara at the time. She now joins us from Hot Springs, Arkansas. Welcome back, Lisa.
Thanks for having me back. Hi, everybody.
All right, it's great to have the two of you on the podcast. This has been the most difficult one to set up. This is what happens when you try to get two digital nomads into a remote space at the same time. Jesse, you are joining us from Puerto Rico. I'm actually not interested in how you got to Puerto Rico, but I'm interested in how you became a digital nomad and how's it going for you?
It's going great. When I sort of think about where I was, 15 years ago, I was intrigued by web design as a business, for the ability to be a freelancer or to have my own little thing, so that I could do this exact thing. I think the cool thing about having your own consultancy is that you can charge the prices you want to charge, and you can spend the money the way you want to spend it, and then most importantly, you can use your time and your schedule how you see fit. And I think it's a great luxury that we don't think about. These 9 to 5 jobs, man. If you show up one day late, you might be an executive or whatever. Mid-manager, you show up one time late, you could get fired. I just think that's so crazy. And so trying to avoid being fired and still have fun, and then adapting that into having as much fun as possible.
So this idea, you've already said like three things that are really fascinating to me. So the first one is you started off sort of in this kind of web design world. Is that right? And then it has sort of blossomed into being a full-on creative agency that you run And in this way, you sound different than the typical digital nomad. How are you different than what is the typical digital nomad and how are you different?
Yeah. So, I started out as a one-man show that created a portfolio for myself. And back in the day, your Flickr name, your AIM, Instant Messenger name, all these names kind of had to be coordinated. Anyway, so that's kind of how Jess3, the name and the URL happened. It was my portfolio for my own personal work. And I had, jobs. I worked at AOL. I worked at Ogilvy PR. I worked at another PR firm in the DC area. And all the while on the side, my projects and stuff I would put on this website. Anyway, from there, I created an agency and we do more things. And then of course the web design industry has changed. People don't need websites anymore. And so we've adapted to that and content would be the way to kind of think of this new bucket. So that includes infographics and all forms of visual content, as well as like animations and short films, which is a super hot thing that, I don't know, like more than half of the work we're doing right now is around like short films that are like less than a minute long kind of thing. The traditional digital nomad, when I think of the kind of 10 years ago, or even, and then the 15-year ago version, the 10-year, the classic digital nomad is like a web developer, perhaps a web designer that is working off of their laptop. And that idea kind of started with the laptop, right? That you could work remotely with this desktop replacement. And then the internet, of course, made that possible. So that all happened all those things kind of came together. And then the mobile web being a part of that as well. So when I think of it as a young person, I think of it as somebody in their 20s, perhaps, or, mentally in their 20s, who is working perhaps in like living month to month on a lease that might be month to month. And I think when we think of the term nomad, we might think it's 1 to 3 months what a nomad means, but sometimes these people are staying in these places for a year. I don't know. What do you call that? Is that so? The digital nomad, I think, is more of a frame of mind, a commitment to living like that over a long period of time. Because I think what you'll find is you can sustain that lifestyle of, I'll stay here for a year. Oh, okay. You get in a relationship. Oh, okay. Stay for a couple more years, versus the month to month stuff is actually quite tricky to sustain financially. Not everybody can do that. And just it's straining because there is so much travel and then packing up your stuff. Then you've also got to pick the right places. And so every once in a while, you're going to pick the wrong place. You're going to be stuck in that wrong place for a month or whatever. So, finding the right spot and picking the right amount of time to be there is part of it. My one thing that I think a lot about with my traveling is being in the right place at the right time. So whether it's in Africa for the Great Migration, or you want to be in the New England area when it's in the summer, and you want to be in the United Kingdom in the summer. You don't want to be there in the winter. So just some of the basic stuff like that. And so I'm always thinking about seasonal travel and the effects of that on where you're going. So yeah, you don't want to be in Chicago in the middle of winter without your, snow jacket.
Jesse, can you share with us what else makes a place attractive to you? And if appropriate, can you share where you've gotten stuck? And
where should Lisa avoid? That's what she's asking.
I think Instagram really changed the travel game, the digital nomad travel world. I think one of the things that I do a lot of is I'm saving into a folder the name of a place or a city or a country, and then I'm keeping track of the stuff that I kind of want to recreate in Instagram, and then on a list and a note as well. In particular, I'm also saving things in Google Maps. So if I see some great steak or some cool cow or whatever it is on some photo, I think, okay, let me find that thing. Let me find it on Google Maps, and I try to save it in those different places. But most importantly, I keep a list for all the places that I'm planning to travel. Most of the things that are going to end up on that list are food related. So I travel for food. I had a place in Nashville where it was an Airbnb. So one of the things about Airbnb is sometimes people will incorrectly list the property, right? So you've got the entire home designation, which is probably the most desirable. Then you've got the shared, and then you got the private. So this guy had his music studio in the apartment. Okay, this is like a 3-bedroom apartment. One of the bedrooms had his music studio. So we rent the place, we show up, And he's like, oh, actually, I'm going to come by tomorrow to work on some music. I'll just let myself in and I'll just be in the studio. Don't worry. I might be in the kitchen to make myself. I was just like, wait, what? So depending on.
You're like, now I know why this was such a screaming deal.
Yeah. Well, see, but the deal thing is sometimes price it's not just about, exactly right. In this case, I had been duped. And it was more of a case, I think, that Airbnb is kind of, willy-nilly, loosey-goosey sometimes on some of those classifications. They want to be on the side of the lister, and not being overly kind of, telling them what to do. And so sometimes you get those weird non-entire homes. You also find that where, so sometimes you'll get a house listing. So it'll say entire home, entire house or whatever, and then the owner lives in the basement underneath.
I don't want to go too deep. These are fun stories. I don't want to go too deep in them because you're basically going to convince people to not be a digital nomad before you convince them.
I got great
to be
stories too.
Nomad.
Yeah, those are just some funny random ones. Yeah. When you're saving money though, this is the thing. When you're saving money, you're cutting corners. You're used to a hotel lifestyle where everything is a square deal. You get a refund if it's not. Airbnb, you're still going to get the refunds if things aren't right, but there's a lot of gray area with Airbnb. And you can take advantage of that as well though.
So I already hear you, and I think Lisa's already trying to hone in on one of these considerations. And I actually want to talk about Lisa's decision making about where you're going to live or where you're living. But so it sounds like there's this one issue of, a requirement for this job is some flexibility. That is that you can work it on different time zones, that you need connectivity, but you don't actually need to be meeting face to face with clients in the same room and so on, right? This is where the initial sort of nomads came from. Obviously, the rise of Airbnb and just the internet makes it easier, but you're saying so work aside, you have the flexibility to go where you want to go. I had come across this idea of digital nomadship fairly recently. I was in Berlin visiting one of my friends, and he offhandedly told me about some guy who works at TechCrunch who's a digital nomad. And I was like, what exactly is a digital nomad? And he went into, he's like, yeah, someone who's kind of without an official home, moves around, they need a laptop and a phone and so on. And I kind of went down the rabbit hole studying this stuff and frankly, at times fantasizing about it. And one of the themes was Berlin in the summer, Bali in the winter. So you're chasing warmth. Mm-hmm. So one consideration, it sounds like which is a consideration for you, is you were in Alaska in the summer, obviously not in the winter. And then the other one might be a personal desire, right? So you're chasing food, right? So we had chatted briefly before this. You chase fruit. Is that right, Jesse?
Yeah.
You're a fruit chaser.
I am.
And so when we were warming up here, I asked what you had for breakfast, and what did you say?
Well, I just gotten some great mangoes from a farmer a couple days ago. I had them in the fridge. They're perfect, cold, large, amazing.
Yeah, so you chase fruit as part of your choice among places, yes?
Yeah, well, right. So I grew up in the DC area. My family's from New Zealand, and I did spend a bit of time there. In the DC area, it's like any major city. You go to Whole Foods. You can find a dragon fruit or a star fruit or whatever if you're looking. They have a very small section of exotic fruits or whatever. The problem with just starting with the pineapple or the banana, a pineapple or a banana might be picked. So bananas are picked green, right? Big bunch of them green. Pineapples are still kind of firm and greenish. But so 90 days can go by from the time that they're picked to the time that you purchase it at the Whole Foods. And you don't know if it's 90 days, or 60 days, or 30 days. You have no idea of time. It's not like they don't feel the need to put any kind of date on things. You just got to look at it. So one of the problems is at your local supermarket, even the Whole Foods, the nicest supermarket you can possibly get your hands on, whatever, the exotic fruit is still always going to be kind of questionable. And most people that aren't into food or in the food business or whatever aren't ever really going to dabble in that stuff.
So, okay, well, it should be clear to the listeners that you are indeed chasing fruit in a variety of ways in your life. Lisa, you're in Hot Springs, Arkansas. What are you chasing there?
I was chasing basically getting to have a summer with family.
Okay.
Awesome nephews who are 12 and 15. And they still think I'm pretty cool. So I wanted to get some time with them and time with family. And then just time in a new location just to explore and see what, really similar to what Jesse was saying, like, could I live here sometime in the future, at least part-time? I have family here. I've lived the last 25 years in Santa Barbara, and it's gorgeous, but I don't want to be chained to that lullaby. I want to get out and run around a little bit more. But I want to draw fruit hunters as a cartoonist and cookie frogs. You mentioned cookie frogs earlier. But really what strikes me is that as you're doing this, it sounds like Jesse, you're articulating so well, having a passion for something, a pursuit. So you mentioned photography and just food and street art, but then fruit, like you have passions that make a place come alive for you.
Absolutely.
Also, it's a big world. Yeah, it's a big world. You have to make some choices about where you're going to be, even if it's just for a month. You want to try to optimize those elements. So let's talk a little bit about. Let's step back, right? Let's imagine the person who's listening, who's contemplating this, right? The reason I wanted to do a digital nomad episode is because single people have flexibility. They don't have kids in school. They don't have a partner who has a job that they have to do a 9 to 5 necessarily. Right. They can pick up and move. And so it's sort of an ideal lifestyle, and I get the sense listening to you, Jesse, this is going to be temporary. That is that it's hard. It would be hard to spend 20 years as a digital nomad. There's right. At some point it's going to wear on you, but it can be exciting in the meantime.
And the trust you're going to find the X on the map. You're going to find the treasure, the rainbow at the end of the, you know what I mean? And you're going to fall in love with somebody, or you're going to break your leg, or you're going to run out of money, and I think what you're getting to, which is a really important part of traveling and kind of the perspective that I've kind of gotten it over all these years of traveling, is budgeting, right? So you were describing this individual who perhaps that is single specifically, right? Okay, so one of the key things you got to think about is how much money are you spending today, in your current position, okay? Let's call that $2,000 for the average person, let's say. So you're thinking in your month, okay, you have a car, you don't have a car. In my case, I didn't have a car. I was using Uber to get around. So I kind of have an understanding of what I'm spending in a month. Budgeting is so important. And the tip that I want to give everybody is the Airbnb 30-day savings that you can, when you're doing an Airbnb rental for 30 days or more, you are able to access.
These are Airbnb monthly rental. It's a sort of newish feature, I think.
It's a newish feature. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. So when you're searching for an Airbnb for 30 days or more, and there is a specific monthly search category, it kind of takes you to the same place. You're able to access discounts that the lister has chosen to put in there. So they're not always going to be there, and they're constantly changing how you view those discounts. You got to click all the way through, click to the price, it's going to show you the discount. I'm able to find discounts of 90% and everything in between. Let's call it an average of 50%. You could look at Maldives right now, and you could put in November to December, and you can find places that are 50% or more off. So back to that number. So this $2,000 number that sort of the average person is probably working with. One of the big things about budgeting that you got to think about is room and board, transportation, food, entertainment. Those first two are really important. Transportation. So when you're renting a car around the world, I paid as little as $500 on the island of Molokai in Hawaii. Cash deal, local, car rental place, $500. You can pay as much as $2,000 a month to rent a car in United Kingdom or someplace, right? So it's going to be in between that, right? $500 and $2,000 just to have a car. So if you're working with $2,000 or less, okay, well, you're going to have to figure something out on transportation, i.e. go to a place like Paris, go to a place like the Maldives where you're just going to be on an island. You don't need a car. You can save half your budget, because that's about what it's going to cost. Now, you can share that expense, obviously, which is a whole other thing. But if you're just focusing on what you've got to spend, it has to be in that order. Budgeting is so important.
You're saying, okay, the person who's considering doing this, first thing you got to think about, what's your burn rate? So like, where do you want to go? What's it going to cost? What's your monthly budget? Nut, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It seems to me that there's the other side of that, which is, where's your income coming from? Like, what are you going to be living on? Like, how much of this is going to be savings based? How much of this is going to be the money that you're going to be making? How steady is your income? How variant is it? And so on, like how good's business and so on, right? So it seems to me those two things go hand in hand.
They do.
That is, I mean, part of the reason I would struggle as a digital nomad is because I've gotten used to fancy things. I would have been a great digital nomad at 27 as a grad student, but right now I'm just like, all right, well, I guess I'll do this, in a sense. But so, what's your job? Can you continue to make good enough money, not in your home city?
Yeah.
Right? That's the thing. And it seems to me what you're alluding to is some jobs are better than others in terms of making decent money and covering that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I got nothing but bad news for you on that front. I mean, web design and digital design, designing infographics, animations, that's a great business. I got lots of tips around that. But I think, I see a lot of people struggling, and I see a lot of poverty in my travels. I don't know. I see people living cheaply, the kind of people that travel in those hostels and stuff. I mean, there's a lot in between the kind of young hostel traveler and then the kind of middle-aged single digital nomad. One thing you touched on that I wanted to bring back to is, stuff, right? You're saying you're living luxuriously. You have all this stuff. You have all these physical things as well. And putting stuff in storage, which is the first step, by the way, of this digital that is where the movie begins. There's an expense to that. And the cost of that, in a year to have your storage locker, the difference of cost can be $1,000 a month if you're in a city, or $2,000 a month, $2,000 a year to be in the city. It can be like half that price if you go out into the suburbs and go into the rural areas. So that's one of the tricks I learned is with those storage units. The more out in the rural part, the cheaper they're going to be because it is square footage. You're basically renting an apartment with no stuff in it. That really is what the business is. In fact, they will sometimes name the alleyways that you have your storage lockers as streets, and they are landlords. I
see.
So a couple things to think about with that is you need to have your stuff in proper storage because you don't want to be thinking about your stuff getting damaged. And one of the key things about these cheaper storage places is they often are not managing the heat. So let's say you're in Alabama where it can get really, really hot. You're in Chicago where it can get really, really cold and really, really hot. Your stuff can actually get damaged in the cheaper storage companies. So what you want to do is make sure you're sticking with a big company, and you want to make sure that the temperature is managed of all your stuff. But storage of your stuff, that's another one of your expenses. The last thing you want is to be digital nomading and you've run out of money and you think, oh my God, I got to pay the storage bill. So you got to think about how you're going to pay your storage bill as well.
That was going to be one of my questions is what do you put your stuff? And it was sort of like a George Carlin illusion. You got all
At one
this
point
stuff.
I had four storage units around the country. I had 2 in Los Angeles area. I had 2 in the DC area, basically. So I had 4 at once. Yeah. And over time, you consolidate.
I've just downsized. But the flip side of that question, too, is what stuff do you take with you?
Yes.
So I think when you're traveling solo, one of my first tips for people that I love to bring up is on your laptop, I like to bring with me vintage game controllers that plug into the laptop. So I'm playing arcade games, retro games, modern games on the laptop. And your laptop and your different media devices, that's kind of like the first thing you want to get right. With the iPad and the iPhone, you have the tablet and the phone, you have the ability to offline download movies. So that's like step number 1. My tip on that is YouTube has a premium feature that allows you to offline download content. So there's a feature of YouTube called Watch Later, where you're constantly like saving things to your Watch Later folder or whatever. Think of it as like a playlist. You can set that to be downloaded. Okay. So all the stuff that you've just kind of saved can be put there. What they're doing now is they're adding things into these playlists that you're offline downloading that are like suggested downloads. Anyway, so there's a lot you can do with this like offline downloading. Same goes with Spotify. You want to have the biggest storage you possibly can. So tip number 1 for being a digital nomad is making sure that all of your digital devices have as much storage as possible, and you want to fill them all up with entertainment content, not necessarily like your backup of all your photos, not necessarily, right? Because you want to make sure you've got those movies. So renting movies, buying movies, all that stuff. You want to get that library locked down, because sometimes you'll literally be without internet. You've just got these devices. So that's one key thing.
Jesse, I think you are forgetting how advanced you are in the world of digital nomadship, right? So hold on. So let's just step back for a second. You need a phone. You need a laptop. It sounds like it would help to have an iPad or some sort of tablet also.
Right, not necessary for the tablet, actually, right? Mm-hmm.
It's not necessary. Okay, so you need those two things.
I think so.
Obviously, you need a passport, right? You know what I mean?
Yep. You don't need much else, though, man. This is the key thing. Just to interject on that, right? So there's food things, right? So you've got your bathroom bag, you've got your food bag. So in your food bag right now, I've got things like my manual espresso maker, and like a bag of sugar and a bag of salt and a pepper grinder. I've also got like sometimes you'll get in takeout bags, they'll give you the knife and fork with a napkin, stuff like that, or a spoon. Yes. Plastic spoons and stuff like that. I'll kind of have a little collection of that at any given time. But coffee, high quality, ready ground coffee that I can just put in my espresso maker, that would be kind of one key thing. I always have a sketchbook and pens with me. I have a game. I just bought a Game Boy, so I've always got some kind of, retro game thing going on. Books, clothes. The trick is you don't want to overpack. Okay, that's my number. When you're thinking of what to pack, rule number one needs to be don't pack more than you need. So like I'm a big fan of underpacking on the clothing for like the t-shirts or the tops, because you can buy those at that cool bar you go to. You can buy that cool hoodie at the place or whatever. So I try to build in room. What happened in this case, I started traveling in November. I traveled to New Zealand, where I'm from. All my bags were stolen at the beginning of my trip, actually. So I started over buying things on this trip. And so I've really gone out of my way to buy things on the road and then replace just the specific things that I was missing. So I've really gone through this mental exercise of like, what I went through it to begin with, like, what did I need to bring on the trip? And then when that was challenged, I had to then buy those things remotely and then deal with not having them, including the laptop, by the way. As you know, I literally just got the laptop. It's been since November that I've been doing my work off of a phone. Yeah.
That's incredible. How did you get your bag stolen? This sounds like a nightmare for a digital nomad.
It's a nightmare, but it's real life. And so, the real quick story. So outside of my grandmother's house, my cousin lives in this house now. It's in this lovely little, city called Rotorua, which is like a tourist town in New Zealand. I had put my bags in the trunk of my car, my parents' car that I was using. The next morning I was going to leave. And I had planned to leave the day before, but I ended up staying. So my bag stayed in the car, and I just slept in the extra bed kind of thing. When I woke up the next day, the bags were missing. And so what had happened is this thief couple who specialized in breaking into unlocked cars. I'd left the doors unlocked, but it was in the trunk. Anyway, so they had stolen this stuff, and then months later, they catch them. They still had my suitcase that still had my baggage tag and my name on it. So I did actually get the suitcase. My cousin has the suitcase. I've since replaced the suitcase. But anyway, so stuff like that happens where they got everything. I had some cash in there, all the devices, but not the phone. I had one pair of shoes, and that's become a joke on this trip. I have traveled the world with one pair of shoes. Sperry, Dockside, slide, like the boat shoes. One pair of Sperry's boat shoes. One pair of shoes. That's all you need. No socks.
That's great.
That makes me think of something, and I'm on a budget right now, just because I'm in a life transition. So, but I do have some nice equipment, and I extra insure it, which is actually not that expensive. So that would be a pro tip to anybody thinking about doing this: is contact whoever provides your insurance, and you can get certain items added on. So I have some camera gear that is insured. So if anything happens to it, even internationally, it's like $50 a year, and it's a great peace of mind.
And what about insurance?
I asked a digital nomad master. His thing is @MileMethod, and here's the question that I posed to him, which I've always wondered, and I never know if I've gotten this right about medical insurance. So here's the question: the problem with international So there is some international coverage where you pick one country, but you still have worldwide coverage. Of course, it's questionable how they're gonna how good that coverage is gonna be. But a lot of the international coverage actually asks you in advance to pre-select where you're going. Okay, so that's one challenge for medical insurance is you might not know where you're going, and it's tricky to kind of commit to something, or you're like, oh, what if I go to Africa, or what if I do that? So the question I posed to Mile Method is this. Well, I said to him, what insurance do you use? He said, dude, here's the thing, man. I would rather pay out of pocket in country and pay the full price than worry about being overcharged on insurance that isn't going to cover what I need anyway. And so that's basically his take on it. And that's kind of my take on it. So when you're in Costa Rica, the hospital system you're hoping will be affordable. You're hoping that if you're in Tanzania and you have to go from one hospital, if you need to be flown from Tanzania to South Africa or from the big city for the small city to the big city, that you would pay that out of pocket versus paying. You got to think about how much medical insurance is a year. So for you kids at home that have never had to pay your own insurance, think about what this number is going to be. It can be as little as $2,000 or $3,000 a year. It can be sort of like more $4,000 or $5,000 a year. So over a decade, right, of your 20s, you're basically spending 50 grand on insurance. That's a lot of money. So if you're in between kind of, middle class and upper class, you kind of understand how money works. You kind of want all of it to spend on that, on the thing you're spending money on that day. You could argue that the reckless approach is, yeah, pay out of pocket, but in the back of your mind, you're saying, hey, I would have paid 50 grand over this every decade. 50 grand I would have spent on insurance. So that's 50 grand you could spend out of pocket. And I think that's the challenge you have to take on is, are you going to third world countries where they're not really going to even respect the insurance you've got, and you're going to be playing games and, chasing waterfalls on the coverage that's not actually going to cover you?
All right. So it looks like we've covered many of the sort of basics here. So obviously the budgeting, make sure you have a job that is mobile, that actually can finance this lifestyle, the stuff, both the digital stuff, as well as the stuff that you sort of need. It sounds like a little bit of what you're considering is, what are the kind of basic things that you absolutely need to live a little bit of creature comforts, whether it be entertainment-based or your coffee, in these different places. Really operating pretty lean it sounds like the key to this.
So that you can buy on the fly. That's the key of that is, right, the idea that when you're there, you've got room in your suitcase to buy that shirt, or you've got room in your stomach to buy that extra thing at the market because you didn't pre-plan and buy everything at the supermarket when you got there. You thought, okay, let me see how it goes. So that's just a travel philosophy is less. You don't need all that stuff because you're going to have to carry that stuff. You're going to have to carry somebody else's bag too. You're going to be stuck with it. You're going to have to drag it. Your wheels are going to break. Everything's going to go wrong. You're going to have to carry the bag that's got the handles are going to break on top. You're going to have to hold it from the bottom. Everything's going to go wrong. It's going to rain.
Yeah. So Lisa and I I mentioned at the outset that she's a trustee for Semester at Sea. Both she and I have participated in Semester at Sea. It has a little bit of both of these elements where you have this sort of luxurious, comfortable space while you're on this ship going around the world. And then you're in India or Brazil or South Africa or any number of places, Vietnam, and you're sort of mixing it up and you might be rather lean for 4 or 5 days out there in the world. And one of the things that gets preached on the ship, which sounds apt, is this notion of flexibility. Right? Flexibility. Like things are going to go sideways. You have to be able to adapt. And it's interesting to watch the students and the staff and the faculty on Semester at Sea at first struggle with that. And by the end, they're like grizzled veterans. Like they can move adeptly through a culture after being on the ground for 1 hour. They can figure things out.
And one thing that you reminded me of there is the idea of fear when we travel, right? The idea that we're scared that we're not going to be able to get the things we want when we're there, so we have to bring them in advance. We're scared that instead of going to the farmer's market up the street in the third world country like everybody else does, that, oh no, that could be dangerous. So one of the things you learn, I think, very quickly, and what attracts one to travel is that that's a myth. That it's like, Like I grew up in the DC area. There are neighborhoods in DC that are super dangerous where you literally could be physically attacked or die at 10 o'clock in the morning kind of thing. It's not the same in some of these other places where I don't know. So depending on where you're coming from, your idea of fear is going to drive a lot of your decisions. And it's a really cool experience to disarm yourself and to allow yourself to be part of a community and to ask questions. Now, one of the cool things about Airbnb is this is like staying with your uncle or something, right? I don't know. Like they will call, their relative and say, hey, this single person's here, go on a date with them. Hey, this person here has a flat tire, go help them. Hey, this person likes fresh fruit, bring him some fruit, whatever. But they're pulling their Rolodex out for you. And so that experience is actually typically reserved for the concierge experience at a Four Seasons or something, right? Where like, yeah, they'll kind of do that for you there, but they'll charge you every step of the way. And you don't always know if that's actually the organic experience. And you're lucky if you find it. So Airbnb, like couch surfing before it, really, the whole idea of that community is that you are going to ask for favors. And when you're in the third world traveling on Airbnb, that becomes very important. You might be in a place that's got political unrest and this person is helping you stay alive, or you're in a place that has very strict rules. And when you arrive at the immigration, this person's got to be on the phone with them. I don't know, like this is like an uncle. This is like a relative that can do so much or so little. And that, I think, there's a really cool, whether you're being a digital nomad or not, just embracing this idea of having a local connection. That if you got into a problem, you might call up that guy and say, hey, wait a second, hey, talk to these guys. Hey, that happens. That really happens, where you put the Airbnb host, to somebody who's giving you some static about whatever. And without that wouldn't have gone as well as it did, kind of thing.
I have a comment and then a follow-up question too. I think my comment is, Jesse, I love how you just said about like be disarmed, like immerse yourself in the culture and the place. And that's part of the beauty of it. We're not going to another place to just have the same fast food we could have at home. I would say though, one of the things I've been finding as a digital nomad as a woman, as I drove across country or came to a new place, I'm pretty friendly and I smile to people, but I don't know the place. And so as a woman, there is an extra layer of travel, especially solo traveling, to be like, is it cool for me to hike alone here? And just try to feel that out. So there's some extra to that. And then I had a follow-up question for you that connects to social. Like I love what you said about Airbnb. They're like your uncle. I'm lucky enough that I'm an artist. So I already painted the woman's house who I'm subletting this from right now. Like it's kind of sweet to bring little gifts or offer something. But my follow-up question for you too, because you've done more of this than I have, is the social aspect. You're in place for a month. How do you connect? What happens if, your friends are halfway across the world and it's nighttime and you're like, who do you hang out with besides the Airbnb uncle connection?
Okay, so for sure, great question. So I think, traveling as a woman, I think what you're really saying, or what I really kind of understand about that, the complexity of that is that as a woman, and I guess this also is, there's a, depending on how physically strong you are as well, as a guy as well, whatever, there's a scale of how open and disarmed you could ever really be, right? Because as a guy, you think, okay, I'm ready. All right, let's fight, but maybe women are never going to be that sort of crazy and sort of be willing to even be that open with it. And they'll always be very reserved about the security. That's a tricky one. Now, with Airbnb, let's say that you've gone out of your way to find a female host, or maybe it's a person of color host, or whatever it is you feel comfortable with, right? And or it's an LGBT host, or whatever it is. Or maybe this is a person that you know or that you've connected with on the road that can help you, guide you on that safety journey. And that's basically all you can do. In your case, it's the aunt, the cool aunt. They're going to kind of give you that insight, but you've also got to pick and choose places that you have that understanding of that are going to work with how you're trying to travel. What was your second question again?
Was the social aspect like?
So how do you meet people? Okay, great question. Yes, right. Yeah, Which is really, I think this whole podcast could be about just that actually. So two things. Obviously, Tinder and the online dating scene is a mobile thing. It's an international thing. So same thing with Uber. When you get into a city, it's like, okay, is Uber the thing here or does it have a different name? And so same thing with Tinder. Some cities have Tinder, other countries have different things. But anyway, it works the same way. So online dating is still a thing, and then regular dating is still a thing. So you can still use your same tricks. You go out with your Airbnb host and on a Friday night with a bunch of young single people and kind of go that route, or do you do what you're normally doing with your online dating? So the dating, I think, is, it's just as hard to meet somebody in a new place as it is to meet somebody in another place. But there's a couple things. And so my second thing is Facebook events are great, because Facebook events, and before that, you had all these different services that kind of pulled together events into single places. That's kind of what Facebook events is now. It's a great single place to find all kinds of events. One of the things I have found great luck with are the VFW. Is that what they're called? VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars. Yeah, VFW. So you're in a rural place, like I was in Alaska. I found or in Hawaii, which I traveled to back to back. I found myself in these rural communities where nothing else was open, and they would have like a sausage pancake breakfast on a Saturday. They'd have like a fish fry on a Tuesday. And you rock up to these places, and it's the coolest thing. There's a bar there. It's older people. They're square. You're in Hawaii, you're in Alaska, whatever. And they do these events on a regular basis. And so that's right there is a classic trick, whether it's the VFW or the Facebook events in particular, to tap into a local community. So also like game nights are fun that I found myself randomly meeting cool people at, because those are the kind of people that are willing to meet people, So like we played Scrabble. There was like a Scrabble night at a Hawaiian game thing that I found on Facebook, and it was super fun. So random stuff like that. Now, normally pre-COVID, you have actual events to go to, and events, sporting events, music events, etc., or lifestyle events, food events. That's why people travel. And I always build back to Facebook events. How do you find those places? That's Facebook events is a really good answer for that. When you're in Google Maps will even show you the RSS feed of the location's events, because it's hard to test this now because nobody's doing events, but you can find, events are there. Google and Facebook are doing a great job. So Google does a similar thing to Facebook, where in Google, if you search, events in Honolulu, they have a very nice interface where they've collected event listings from different places. So Facebook and Google are kind of the answer to that.
Those are great tips. And it actually reminds me of a story about you, Pete, because you can flip it, about being welcoming to whoever's visiting your area and kind of go the extra mile to help them out. Like, this isn't just about, hey, how do we figure out how other people can help us out when we travel, but it's how do we welcome people in. And Pete, I'm remembering a story about you meeting a woman traveling who had like a long layover, and was it LA? I think she was from Asia, and you're like, let me give you a tour. Is this not ringing a bell for you?
No, but it's not because I don't think it didn't happen, but because I probably have done that a number of times in my life, where I just befriend someone who's from out of town and say, oh, well, what are you interested in? Let me give you some tips.
Right.
Lisa, I want to respond to it's interesting hearing Jess, your response about Facebook events and the dating apps. I'm a big fan of Meetup. And so when I'm in a city, especially if I'm in a city, not in a rural community, but if I'm in a city, I'll go on Meetup and I'll look for a writing group. And they actually oftentimes are held either like on a weekend, mid-morning or a weekday in the evening. Yeah. And they're usually at a coffee shop or a cafe or something like that. And I love going to those because you walk in there and everybody sort of introduces themselves, talks about what they're reading. So you get a flavor for who's in the room. Everybody's, friendly. Then you write for an hour or 2 hours. And then usually
you write as well. I thought you
just sit in front of your computer and write. Cool. And then at the end, people usually stick around and have a conversation. And it's a great way to meet people. So I really like the fact that there's a digital thread through all of this, right? So there's the machines that you need to do the job. There's the Airbnb to get your places. There's the dating apps to get your dates. There's the Facebooks and Meetups and Yelps to get your places.
Yeah.
And then, to get your transportation and, and so on. It's such an exciting world. I think there's a highlight, though, a tension between the three of us. There's this idea of being open to new experiences, right? Saying yes in a world that you might not normally say yes to, like being open to chatting with strangers, something you might not do in your own hometown, and so on, versus safety, right? Versus like, I don't want to get myself into a thing where I'm getting ripped off, where I might get assaulted, and so on. I think, Lisa, your question is an interesting one. I mean, I have the great privilege of just being, as our joke when we were young was being a big dumb guy, so like I get to move through the world fairly, comfortably at my height and the way I carry myself and so on. Right. But still, is it daylight? Is it nighttime? It's like daylight always has that easier element to it in terms of finding where people being out on the streets and so on. What is the method of transportation? Right? Like I think of going to Mexico City and what's the state of the art? What's the best practices so you don't get kidnapped? Like you can move through that place in a way that's safe, or you can move through that place that's unsafe. And I think doing, as you were saying, Jesse, a little bit of research to figure out where to go, when to go. My other tip is I like to find a cafe. So when I'm traveling, obviously not as a digital nomad, but if I'm traveling, especially if I'm going to be in a place for a week or two, I often try to find a cafe to sort of start my day. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. You can become a regular. Absolutely, you can. Pretty quickly.
Absolutely. In a week.
3 days. In a week.
Yeah.
2 days.
4 days. You're a regular. They're like, they get to know your name. They know what you're going to order. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then they become a resource, and also a place of entertainment and so on.
Well, absolutely. And it's everybody that you're touching, right? So, it's the Airbnb host. When you walk out the door, you say, okay, is today Tuesday? The trains are closed on Tuesdays, you might say. So make sure you go this way. This is the Airbnb host. Then you're taking that Uber, and the Uber guy says, there's a protest starting down there. Make sure you're not there at 5 o'clock. They're going to have the big alarm bells. So then you're at the cafe, and then it's the waiter, and you're saying, later I'm going to go by that protest at 5. They're going to say, no, don't go at 5, go at 7. So every step of the way, you're communicating, you're keeping notes, mental notes and written notes. But that's it. But that's also in your, and one of the things about traveling is when you go back to living in your town or wherever it is you end up coming back to, you take those tricks with you, and you're more willing to talk to the person there as well. Because you have those same conversations at home, if you're lucky, One of my things, though, aside from trying to be be a regular at one spot, my strategy is actually to go to a different place every day of the week, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and in between as many. Like my goal is to rack up new places and to go out of my way to go to a new coffee place every single day. But if I find a place that I love and there isn't a better place on the list that has more reviews or looks better, I will go back. But I do try to go out of my way to go to a new place, because that's how luck works with places. It's so hard to judge a book by its cover. You do get better and better at judging books by their cover. You can still do that with the Google Maps photos and stuff. Google Maps photos, if you look, because they categorize the photos. They've got photos of the menu. They've got photos of the food. They've got photos of the interior and exterior. You can also read the reviews and understand how people are writing. You can understand who the people are, how they're writing and what they're writing, and the photos they're taking and how they're composing those photos. You can really understand the place. You gotta take the time to do that, though.
So I have a question for both of you. Fitness. Let's talk about fitness. So Lisa, you went from Santa Barbara, which might be one of the easiest places in the world to stay fit, to Hot Springs, Arkansas, which seems like not an easy place to stay fit. And so I'm curious about how you're adapting. And then Jesse, since you've had more experience, like what are some tips that you guys have?
It's a great question, and that's what I've been trying to navigate. So for summertime, it is hot, so part of it's going out early in the morning. And then I love hiking, but early in the morning, there's not a lot of people hiking because people are doing their 8 to 5. So that's that's where I have felt a little bit enclosed, especially I think during COVID. Like a little bit like, I'm not sure exactly where to go, but it's been getting up and getting out and doing something physical every day. And yeah, I'll put on some music and I'll do some, like I'll dance to doing chores or whatnot, just basically like move. And then what's really cool is that I have enough space here. So I have a yoga mat spread out and I don't have to roll it up. I can just, stretch every morning. So that's what I do.
Yeah, I try that. Yeah, I do similar things, where I'm going out of my way to go on walks, longer walks, or walks in places and hikes and stuff that I've never done before. So you've got that kind of thrilling kind of combination of not just fitness, but you're kind of doing something. The cool thing about traveling is you find yourself losing weight for a variety of reasons. Two key reasons. One is you're doing more physical exercise than normal. You're actually out seeing things, standing up and doing stuff, and you're using your body in unique ways. And then your diet is different. Now, most people, when you're doing a weekend trip, you're ordering extra bacon. You're getting the extra dessert with everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like you're vacation mode.
And a lot of American travelers fall into the bucket of like what we'll call the cruise traveler or the all-inclusive traveler. And they are literally trying to get, I remember having a conversation with someone on a cruise ship once, trying to talk them out of this lifestyle, trying to talk them into the Airbnb lifestyle. And the woman was like, this is like in a hot tub. And she's like, well, I paid $35 or whatever it is for the premium all-you-can-drink glass. She's like, I've had 5, Sky vodka drinks already. That would have cost me $60. Like they literally are thinking about maximizing their consumption. And that's a short kind of a travel kind of thing. When you're traveling for a long period of time, or you're doing this digital nomad stuff, the eat, pray, love, like name and brand and story and book and lifestyle, that's a real thing. People are actually doing the eco travel, yoga, vegan thing. And there's a trail for that. Right. And so one of the cool things is combining your passion, which might be this eco, vegan, yoga lifestyle, and going to the places you've always wanted to go and go to Bali or go to Hawaii, and find all those places that the yoga teacher is eating at and kind of be one with that community. Yeah, that's the thing. That's not my thing, but I kind of like being around those types of people. I need to get into that though. That would be good.
I want to do a couple quick kind of faster hitting answers. So Jesse, how do you manage your clients' expectations, right? So you run an agency that produces high quality output for big corporate clients. These are people working not a 9 to 5, but an 8 to 6. These are hard charging individuals. And yet if someone follows you on Instagram, they see your pictures of reindeers and they see your pictures and videos of protests in Portland, and they see lots of mangoes and so on. How is it that you sort of manage the fact that you're doing high quality work, but it looks like you're goofing off all the time?
Well, Peter, because I'm so successful. No, yeah, I think, when you're younger, it's harder to pull that off. Okay. So if you're in your 20s and you're kind of balling, you're kind of going to you're kind of doing luxurious things on your Instagram, that's a cliche, right? Because it's like, but depending on where you're coming from, depending on where your family's coming from with money, obviously that's going to influence how you travel and how you kind of put yourself out there. But in general, for me, the challenge is it's a two-sided challenge, right? Because I've got, on one hand, my clients are looking at my stuff, and then on the other side, my teammates are looking at my stuff. Yeah. My competitors are looking at my stuff. Everybody's looking at whatever, So you've got to be authentic, but you don't want to brag. I mean, brag's not the right word. You don't want to flaunt. That's not the right word either. You don't want to seem distracted. Okay. But I think what I am doing and what I am able to do, what I'm lucky that I'm able to do, is prove to myself that I can have fun, but then also create a great work product at a price that the clients like to pay. And clients understand that I'm a unique individual, so I can kind of get away with that. But I'm lucky that I'm in that position, that I have this creative agency that I can kind of be fun with,
I think, hearing you talk about this, it seems like you play by a different set of rules. That is, what would be a bug for most people is a feature for you. That is that, Jesse's this creative individual. He's this sort of bit of a globetrotter. Let's see if we can nail him down, but he's going to deliver. Versus the person who might be a little less experienced, have less expertise, be still cutting their teeth, where they might need to downplay a little bit of that.
Okay, so there's that.
Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say, but here's the educational bit for people that are listening and what they can do with their lives, right? So the thing whenever I talk to a young designer, a young person that isn't a designer, or even just anybody in this audience, is the importance of a team. Okay, So the reason that I'm able to live like this is because I have an incredible team of people that make the work look great, right? So if you want to have a lifestyle we'll call this the manager lifestyle. We'll call this
it's the creative director. It's the creative director
But
lifestyle.
those words that I chose are important. Manager and executive. Okay. So managers and executives have a different thing going on, right? Because they're in this, whatever, they're making more money. They have more control. Their next move is going to be a bigger thing than something. So the point that I'm trying to get across to this broader audience that doesn't necessarily want to have a creative agency, is how is a team going to happen under your management? Okay. Like, you are never going to be a millionaire as an employee. Nobody's ever going to pay you $1 million. You want to be a millionaire? You're going to be lucky to make $100,000. You're going to be super lucky to make $150,000 in your lifetime as a salary. Okay. But if you can figure out how to be the manager of your own company, how to own your own company, how to be your own executive, whatever, start up your own thing, you're going to have a team of people that are going to do work while you're fishing, while you're sleeping in. These younger people, whatever the work is, they're going to be doing it while you're over here. Now, that is something that you have to earn. You can imagine setting something like that up and then it fails while you're on the road. I got all sorts of stories to tell you about that kind of stuff as well. But that's kind of what you're dealing with, is you take the time to set something up that you can manage remotely. And then you think to yourself, okay, this could be managed remotely, right? And then you step away and you test that out. But you're always, depending on what kind of team you're managing, you're always at risk of that thing falling apart, right? Are you managing a hot dog stand from Bali that's in New York City? Are you managing a creative agency where you've got, these are different things, but the importance of a team and to have this lifestyle, you have to understand, you have to manage a team. You have to own a company that has employees to live like this. A single employee can only really make so much, right? And can only really do so much. It's an important thing to figure out that team service that you want to offer that might attract you to even doing it.
I think you just answered the next question, which was sent to me by Kim, which is, what's sort of the best career for digital nomadship? But it sounds to me like you're saying you're not a single operator, but rather you're doing more project management related stuff.
A service business where a consulting is very specific, and not everybody can do that. Like, that's like only 15% of people can do consulting, right? So everybody else, that's a tricky one. That really is tricky. I don't have good things to tell you on that, actually.
Okay. So Lisa, you chose well with your particular skill set.
Awesome. I looked into that. I think being an artist too. And there are probably going to be phases. Like, I would say to somebody who's considering this, if you're considering it between career choices or between jobs, that anything you could do, most people are working remotely right now, like get a taste of it if you can. The luxury of Hot Springs, Arkansas, it's beautiful. There are really cool things to do outside. It's also unbelievably inexpensive. Mm-hmm. And so I'm saving money by traveling right now.
Yeah, as I was sort of thinking this through, in my last book, I talk about how regular everyday people should consider a sabbatical. Mm-hmm. And so in many ways, a sabbatical is an ideal time to consider digital nomadship. It's going to force you out of your comfort zones. You might have saved the money to be able to live on, so you don't have to work too much. Like, you can treat it as more of adventure first, work second. You can try out a new life, and then you have something to come back to. And
then most people might have mom and dad pay half the trip money. So a lot of people are doing those things at the early start of their life, where mom and dad are still paying for things.
As a younger person, yeah. So my last thing, looking at the clock, is how do you avoid burnout? So I want you to answer this for Lisa. Lisa's just getting started on this. This is all new. She's figuring this stuff out. How do you avoid that idea of like, oh, I don't feel like I have a home. Oh, this is starting to wear me down, and so on.
Okay. So always having a backup plan for where would you go if you get injured? Where do you go if you're depressed or you're running out of energy, right? And that place might be your home or your second home or some family place, because then that allows, so there's that. But generally security is kind of what you're looking for in that backup plan. So for me, one of the things I think a lot about is like, okay, what would I do if I had just one project and my budget was more like $1,000 a month or whatever, right? Like you can find for $500 a month, you can be in the Maldives. You can stay in the Maldives for $500 a month. You can stay in Paris for $500 a month. So this number, this $500 a month number, I think a lot about. I'm constantly on Airbnb checking out what is the lowest price for a month rental that's a super host classification in a place that I might want to be. And I'm constantly just gleeful when I find a listing where I'm like, man, that's incredible. For $1,000, you can get this house, or $500, you can get this apartment for a month in a place. So financial security is another key thing. You just want to always think about, like, where am I going to go if the money goes a bit low, right? That's something to think about, because your money does fluctuate when you're living like this, right? So you always want to think about, where do I go for security, financial security, or family kind of time, or visiting friends. But so visiting friends and family is that key thing for this kind of lifestyle. You're connecting the dots. You're thinking, okay, I'm going to go here for the family reunion. Okay, I'm going to go to this wedding. Okay, I'm going to visit my friend at his house here. And you're trying to connect. You're kind of keeping track of people you can kind of stay with. You're kind of keeping track of people you want to visit. And then when you're on the road, you find yourself keeping track with keeping in touch with those people. Because you think in the back of your mind, yeah, I might want to visit that person. For me, it was a friend that I needed to send packages to, or like whatever. Sometimes you need favors along the road, and you want to make sure that you're staying in touch with your support team, your friends and your people that are going to be able to help you if you're in a disaster, your good friends.
Lisa, what's your reaction to that?
I like the idea about the backup plan and just checking in with yourself. So like, yeah, if you hit a lull or a low spot, that that, oh, this is where I go. These are my buddies that I stay with for a couple weeks, swinging through to that. It also makes me think about, like, gosh, this is so complicated, but how cool would it be if it was easy to just buy like a 5-bedroom house someplace in the middle of the country that's not very expensive, and so that you team up with other digital nomads so people stay behind to take care of the pets, and you always have your room, but then you're off for a couple months and then you come through and they're off. And so I don't know, some kind of a home base like that would be really cool.
Those exist.
Yeah, and that's the thing about being a digital nomad, is that it doesn't need to be location like outside of DC or Boston or New York or LA. It could be in Montana. It could be in Arkansas. There's lots of cool places, that you could do that.
Yeah, that lowers that burn rate. Okay, so this is such a digital nomad thing for us to have done, given that we're in 3 different places and using laptops and internet to be able to record this. As I said, this is a nice little fantasy for me. We'll see post-COVID. Do I take some of this out for a spin, so to speak? But I wanted to say, Lisa, thank you for coming back. And I, as I had said in the previous episode, I'm so thrilled for you climbing your second mountain, and it's good to see you taking these initial steps and clearly thriving, albeit sweaty, thriving. And Jesse, it's great to connect with you further as an expert in this, and as someone who's very clearly really passionate about this lifestyle and realistic about its pros and cons. I think you've been a welcome voice in terms of people. I think that anybody listening to this is not going to get a false sense that this is either really great or really terrible. It has opportunities, but it also has costs. And so I want to thank you so much for taking the time away from your Instagram pictures and videos, as well as from your management of your award-winning creative agency. And with that, I'm going to say thanks to both of you.
Thanks.
Cheers.
All right.
Thank you for listening to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. For more about our guests and show